Mr. Director, do you have a message for me from the chairman? Mr. Director, do you have a message for me from the chairman?
I'm sorry. A message for you?
Is the chairman going to be here today?
I don't have a message for you particularly, but
I got something I got to say.
Okay.
But your chair, the director's calling.
Okay, so
You're running.
very well.
Commissioner Cole is on the phone, correct?
correct.
Okay, well, that's exactly what that's good staffing. Thank you. All right, at this time, we'll call to order the policy board meeting for the Pensacola and Perdido Bays Estuary program. We'll begin with a roll call. Staff?
What's that? No, go ahead.
Councilman Schluter?
Here.
Councilman Hill? Commissioner Bender? Here. Commissioner Underhill?
Here.
Commissioner Peach?
Here.
Mr. Deely?
For Commissioner Gruber, proxy here.
Mr. Speed? He's on his way, right?
He is here, he's on his way.
And Commissioner Cole on the phone?
Here.
Okay. Did I miss?
This constitutes a quorum, so we will go ahead and begin the meeting. Before I move to the approval of the minutes, I will give each member of the board an opportunity to speak if they have anything that's for the good of the whole prior to our beginnings. Commissioner? Chairman? Commissioner? Nothing from me. Commissioner Peach?
Mr. Chairman, I have a letter here that Commissioner Cole asked me to read to the board and read into the record. It's dated 2 October 2019. It says, it's addressed to Commissioner Bob Cole. Commissioner Cole, please accept this letter as my formal resignation as the director of the Pensacola and Perdido Bays Estuary Program. My final day of employment will be October 25th, 2019. I'll be happy to assist the program during this transition period. Thank you sincerely, Jim Trefilo.
All right. Jim, is there anything that you want to add to that, or is that pretty much covered down on the basis?
No, I would just say that I've enjoyed my time here. I just don't think that the program was a good fit for me, and I don't think I was a good fit for the program. I want to see this program succeed, and I'm happy to help in any way I can in the future.
Okay, well, you've certainly got a great track record in the trade, and certainly I'm sure you have successful fits in the future as well. It takes a lot of discipline to be able to look at something and say, hey, this just isn't the right fit, and to put the program ahead of your own personal interest to allow us to be able to move this program forward in a different direction. So I respect your being forthcoming that way and bringing that up. So having seen that we have a resignation of the executive director, Matt, do you think it would be appropriate for us to take a vote in accepting or declining that resignation?
Certainly, that's the will of the board. It wouldn't hurt.
Okay. Just for the purposes then of keeping everything clean and really, putting a tight bow on it, I would recommend. I would entertain a motion to accept the resignation of the executive director.
Mr. Vice Chairman, I make a motion to accept the resignation of the executive director with a final day of employment of October 25th, 2009.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Very well. Any discussion?
Comments before voting?
Yes, we have discussion from Commissioner Cole. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Thank you. Hopefully you hear me all right.
We can.
Jim, I want to personally let you know I appreciate what you've done to this point. I really don't understand. I understand your bequest to resign. I don't understand some of the comments that were pointed or told to me as far as, and I'm going to be quite honest, inferiority, not getting the job done, not moving the job ahead as fast as it should be. I didn't see any of that. I commented to the department that's funding this. There also was no concern with that. They did have comments to make. I don't see how you could have moved forward any quicker. I'd like to vote against your resignation, but I'm going to vote for it because it's your choice, not a board choice to have you resign. But I do question if you were the number 2 guy and there's people that feel like you weren't qualified, then who on the selection committee or who all on the selection committee dropped the ball out of all the candidates that you became number 2? So I just want that on record. I'm not real happy with what I've heard, and I certainly wish you success in the future. And kind of for the flack you're getting, don't blame you for what for your resignation. So
I appreciate your
Thank you.
comments. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chairman Cole. Any other comments from the members of the board prior to the vote? Okay, so I have just one comment that I would like to make. As we make this vote, it's a very serious matter. I expect that the staff, remaining staff, should be able to present a transition plan, show us how this is going to, how we're going to manage this transition, and that should be presented to this board. I don't think it should take any more than about 2 weeks to put that together, unless there are members of the board who believe to the contrary. So then I would ask for a friendly amendment to the motion to require a transition plan be presented to the members of this board individually within 2 weeks.
Motion as amended.
Second stands.
Okay, we have a motion and a second stands with the amendment. Any further discussion? Seeing none, please vote.
hey, sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would just say, I understand that we're still in the process of other hires and would like to see that, see that continue.
I'm sorry, Bob, did you catch that?
no, I didn't. Go ahead, come back again, please.
This is Commissioner Bender, just saying that I know that we're in the process of hiring other staff positions and would like to see that continue to move forward.
It's not coming through clear to me as far as what you're saying. I can hear you, but I can't make it out.
Okay, actually, Matt, could you go ahead and see if it's working better from your microphone? If you could go ahead and speak,
Turn that mic.
since you're directly there by the phone.
Okay, Commissioner Cole, what Commissioner Bender was saying is just to allow the process to continue hiring the 2 support staff positions, the senior scientist and the outreach coordinator.
Comment is that if we go through a new search, that we don't select, the same people aren't on the search committee. We pick up a new search committee, do the new search, or as Commissioner Underhill said, staff come up with a transition plan, present. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cole. Any other discussion on the matter before the board? Go ahead, Mr. Posner.
Just going to clarify that staff can absolutely get you that transition report in the next 2 weeks.
You can.
Mm-hmm.
That's a reasonable deadline?
Yeah.
Got it. Any further discussion? Okay, staff, does this have to be done by a roll call vote, or can it just be a show of hands? So by show of hands votes, all in favor of the motion before the board, say aye. Raise your hand.
Aye.
Let the record reflect that it is a unanimous vote in favor of accepting the resignation of the executive director. Next item on our agenda is the approval of the 8/28/2019 BEP Policy Board minutes. Do I have a motion or discussion? Seeing no hands for a discussion, I would accept a motion in favor.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second to accept the minutes of the 8/28/2019 meeting. Any discussion? Seeing none, by show of hands, please vote. The record reflect that by unanimous vote, the minutes are approved. This brings us to item number 4 on our agenda, the director's update.
Thank you, sir. We've been trying over the past month or two to raise the sort of level of awareness of the Estuary program. So you'll see in your packet a number of social media, website, podcasts, WEAR TV interview. I don't know if you can pull up some of those on the screen, Matt. You can, sure. And this is not exactly a website, if you will, because it's not that interactive, but it's more of a storyboard, story page to bring people in. It's not my forte, but once you get your outreach person on board, they're going to have the skills to develop these a lot better than I have. But this is just a beginning start for sort of a lead into a web page. We have a Twitter account, which has been reasonably successful, getting some people to follow us. I don't know if you can bring up the Twitter account. No? That's all right. You can just go, once you just play the WEAR interview. What's that?
While we're pulling, Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, Mr. Cole.
while we're pulling up that WEAR interview, I want to say I stood at the sidelines and listened to Jim as he was being interviewed, and I applaud him on the knowledge he had and how he was able to just answer off the cuff. Jim, you did a great job with that interview.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Cole. Back to you, Matt. How are we doing on it? I need you to speed it up, man.
David, do you have the audio? We could just send this out to the board afterwards.
It's up, it's just not playing through. I have it up, but it's not playing.
Well, it works better in real life. So. That's right.
We can all polish our lip reading skills. So we're recognizing then that the interview, and then of course taking Commissioner Cole's firsthand experience with it at face value. I'm sure it was an excellent interview.
Well, and it was a great site. Mr. Cole suggested Florida Town Park, and they're actually talking about doing a living shorelines project there, which is a perfect type of project for an estuary program. So the backdrop was great. The questions were intelligent. Hopefully my answers were reasonably intelligent. And those are the types of things that we need to do more of. We also had American Shoreline podcast that we did with the other two Northwest Florida estuary programs. That was about an hour long, so we're not going to play that obviously for you here, but it was an interesting discussion. Just the fact that the Panhandle is seeing some really aggressive moves towards dealing with some of the projects or problems that we've had over the years, particularly with water quality issues. So if you get a chance, a few free minutes, you might want to take a listen to that. On November 14th, the DEP will be holding the first Florida Deepwater Horizon Restoration Summit over in Fort Walton Beach, my old stomping grounds. You may want either send some staff there. I'm sure Matt's going to that. You may want to go yourselves. I think it'll give you the opportunity to see what types of projects are going to be and are being conducted right now around Florida under some of the deepwater funding sources. You can expect a pretty big crowd at that. So I'd heartily suggest you go to that. Staff positions, we talked about a little bit. The job descriptions are in your package. They still have not been advertised. I submitted those positions to the HR department in mid-August. I have had a number of comments from HR and other folks in the system saying we're doing it this week, and I don't have a clear answer for you as why they're not advertised yet. It's my understanding that this amount of time to get these things advertised is way out of the ordinary for what a normal job description would have, or new job would have been to be posted. So I don't have an answer for you if you're going to ask why aren't they posted yet, because I don't know.
It's certainly, if I could follow up, that is no fault of Jim's, but we followed up with HR last night and this morning to make sure that the process is moving forward. It is moving through the approval process in NeoGov and hopefully should be advertised, if not Friday, early next week.
Thanks to Matt, we have submitted the semi-annual progress report to EPA on the grant. We are not behind on anything that I'm aware of. We haven't had no correspondence from EPA or anyone else for that matter on being behind on anything that, as far as deliverables for the EPA grant. Now, when the grant was initially contemplated and applied for, there were some projections as to when things would happen. We're behind on those, if you will, but a lot of that was predicated on the director position being filled, and that took more time than it was expected. So those things aren't problematic, but they look like they're behind schedule. But effectively, we're not behind schedule at all on anything in the grant. And if we were, I'm sure EPA would let us know about it. I would highly suggest, some of you have alternates to your positions. A lot of you do not. I would highly suggest that you go back to your individual organizations and make sure that you have alternates so that we don't run the risk of wasting your time by not having a quorum. I know everybody's got tight schedules and it's difficult, but that will help to a large extent if you have alternates in place. So I would definitely suggest doing that. And
Mr. Director, have we ever had a problem meeting a quorum of the policy board?
It's come close.
So that's a
times
no.
that I've been here.
So that's a no.
That's
Thank
a
you.
no, yeah. And I would also let you know that Okaloosa County has appointed John Hofstad, the county administrator, as the alternate for Commissioner Boyles.
Jim is on the phone, by the way. I just wanted to make sure. I wasn't sure if I was called on that roll call this morning or not. But good morning.
Good morning, thank you. We've got your attendance registered.
So finally, in the update, I would also highly suggest that you start rotating the location of these meetings, given the fact that it's not only multi-county, multi-municipality, but multi-state. You need to, I know it's not the most convenient thing to move around all the time, but I think it's a show of good faith to bring everyone into the fold, if you will, and to make them feel like, you know, they have a place at the table as well. So the next meeting, thanks to Woody for setting this up at Orange Beach Council Chambers, will be November 6th, 2019. I've got tentative there, but I think that's pretty well locked in.
It is.
And that's all I have for you on updates.
Any comment or discussion on the director's update? Seeing none, thank you very much, Jim. Appreciate it. This takes us to action item number 1.
So as you know, we've had discussions in the past of the committees being under sunshine. Are they advisory in nature? Are they fact-finding in nature? This policy board had a presentation by one of the Escambia County attorneys last meeting, and I think it was clear and it was direction from the board that all of the committees be advisory in nature and therefore under sunshine. One of the concerns from people in the committees was that being under sunshine was going to limit their ability to speak offline about issues that were important to the committee and important to this policy board. So what we have done, and with the blessing of the attorneys, is to develop a 3-person official board. So there'll be a chair, a co-chair, and an at-large person. They will be under sunshine. Everybody else who shows up into the meetings at, say, the technical committee, they can have a conversation. They can have a conversation offline. They have a conversation at the meetings. It's only those 3 individuals that will vote, and only those 3 individuals that won't be able to speak to each other offline on issues that they can reasonably think would come before this board for a vote. But in my thinking, I think that you're not the experts on a lot of these things. You need technical experts to give you advice. And if those committees are advisory, they have to be under sunshine. That's just the way the law is, from my understanding and from what the attorneys have told us. So if you look at the changes to your bylaws, what I would ask that you do is that you initiate section 5.2, making all the committees advisory in nature, and recommend approving the changes to section 5.5 and authorizing the chairman to sign the amended bylaws.
Any discussion from the members of the board? Any discussion from the members of the board on the phone? Okay, so then I will.
Just,
Go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, I understand sunshine, and it's there for a reason. I just worry that it's really going to hamper this group from getting things done. So if it's what the attorneys have said, and this is the minimal we could do to comply, you know, I just want to make sure it's the minimal we can do, because, you know, things like this, I mean, they thrive on folks giving ideas and talking and all that. And I think a lot of us feel, you know, the sunshine does, to a point, limit us, you know, in some things. I perfectly understand it's a great thing to have in place. But to take it down to that working level, just, I mean, it seems like it's going to add more and more layers that is going to hamper the progress of this board. So if it's the minimum we can do to comply with the law, then I'm for it. But I just want to make sure we're not handcuffing folks that are out there doing good work for us.
And if I may, if it doesn't work, you can always come back and revisit this. But I think what we're looking at is, and we've already gotten volunteers for those positions on each of these committees, for the chair and the co-chair and the at-large, people that normally wouldn't speak to each other offline anyway. And so hopefully that will work out. But like I said, if it doesn't, we can certainly come back and revisit and try to do it in a different way.
And, Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Please.
Thank you. And again, I mean, of course, we talked about this the last meeting. We don't want to hamper those that are the technical in nature, and those that are involved in every day, from either hampering their own work or hampering their efforts towards this program. But again, this is something that that we have to follow as given to us by the legislature. You know, it's, you know, again, as we discussed last time, it's a dangerous precedent to try to find workarounds around something like this. And although it, you know, those that are a part of this committee may not feel that it's necessary, again, it's the law that we have to follow, and you know, not trying to force our ways onto them, but again, it's part of the world we live in, and so not to say this is the bare minimum, but this is what allows them to send recommendations, official recommendations through us to the director, that we can follow and get their expert knowledge given to us as we check all the boxes, is what it does. So I'm glad that we are trying to limit the impact that it has in terms of finding people that normally wouldn't communicate with each other offline, that may be in different, I mean, I think it'd be great if they're in different silos or different specialties. And then you get that wide range and of knowledge, and hopefully that they will listen to all the other input that they receive from community members and members of the program that are there to provide input.
Any other commentary? Seeing no other lights on, hearing nobody from the telephone, I'll take my comments now at this time. I do not believe that any of these committees are in fact advisory, and in fact what I would expect them to do is to contextualize the technical problem, to give us the lay of the land of what that technical problem is, and then provide multiple alternative courses of action. Okay? I don't want, an advisory committee is one that says, we advise you to do this. That's not that's not the appropriate thing for a committee to do, in my opinion, because it is actually the members up here who raise our hand and vote that are responsible for whatever we vote for. And I've heard it all too often by people in our roles say, well, I was following the advice given to me by the advisory committee. It doesn't work that way. We don't get to delegate that responsibility. So in my opinion, these are in fact fact-finding committees, and if these committees come to us with recommendations, I'm going to be sending them back to the drawing board to show me the problem, show me the parameters of the problem, show me what my available courses of actions are, what my limits of authority are. That's what a fact-finding and a technical committee should be doing. So In my opinion, these are all fact-finding committees. They are not advisory committees, and therefore should not be in the sunshine. Furthermore, for each of us who are elected officials and have staff members that might be appropriate people to be on these boards, you're going to end up having your municipalities, counties, staff members are probably going to have to not participate on these committees because they're going to put themselves in a sunshine position with you. That may prevent them from being able to do their other duties for you as a county commissioner or city council person. So I personally will be voting against it and recommend that we not make these advisory committees, but make them fact-finding only. And that is not skirting the law in any way. That's actually being very clear about what the purpose of the committees are.
And Doug, we had a pretty good discussion on that last time, and of course said that, but when they do start giving recommendations and ranking things in order of importance or the order in which they recommend it should be done, that was where we fell into the issue.
And at that point, I feel like they're doing things that should be done by the executive staff or by this board ourselves. So I would, like I said, if they send me, and you've seen this like with our Restore board, right? They send us this rack and stack. Okay, but that's not what we end up doing. So they shouldn't rack and stack. They should look at these things and say, here are the merits, here are the risks, and then the elected decision makers who carry the burden of that decision need to look at that information and then make a decision. So whether or not, I don't really, with no disrespect intended, I don't care if the TDC says this is the number one choice or this is your preferred course of action. That's not what these committees ought to be doing. And so for myself, and recognize and followed along with the other conversation and tracking what everything that was said there. But like I said, I don't really want to see that out of these committees. I want to see them contextualize the problem, give us the layman's background of technical knowledge that's necessary for the decision making, and then give us multiple courses of action that we may take one of those, or some combination of those, or none of those at all.
And I agree to a point, but I think to not have them rank or do anything like that, it doesn't mean that we don't question and reevaluate when we get it. But I would still like to know their opinion as a board on what they feel are the most important. And that, again, that doesn't mean we have to adopt it, but it gives us a starting point to move from.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilwoman?
I think that I'm uncomfortable with the recommendation because it seems like we're like a quasi, this 3 of you are sunshine, the rest of you aren't. I think that's almost like an evasive move as well. I agree that I think they should not give us advice. I think we need to, or give us recommendations. I think we need to clarify that and make sure they understand that they are not a sunshine group. And I guess I would be voting against this as well.
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead, please.
I asked the question last time, and with great respect to the state of Florida and its sunshine law, how do the other estuary programs operate with their technical committees and their education outreach committees and other committees that they have? Have we looked at how they operate? Do they have a similar issue in their bylaws?
You've looked at it more than I have.
Sure. So, of course, the examples we use most are from Florida. So, the Tampa Bay National Estuary Program, they have a fact-finding technical committee and a fact-finding citizens committee, which is equivalent to our education committee. Fact-finding only. Anything that comes out of that goes to the staff of the program to then formulate that into a recommendation to take up to their management board and then finally to their version of our policy board. That is the model that we based the Pensacola-Prudhoe Bay program when we started this a little over a year ago, and it's worked for them. Now, whether they are following everything to a T, it's certainly open to interpretation. But
When you say staff, you're talking about the estuary program. That would be if we had hired a chief scientist and others underneath the executive director position, those staff members?
that's correct. The director, the senior scientist, et cetera.
Thank you.
Just a question, and I guess, Matt. So if the committee gives it to staff and they come and they rack and stack, the committee's allowed to come to the meeting and go, I disagree with the rack and staff as a public
Absolutely,
person.
absolutely. Anybody from those committees can meet with you all individually here at open forum, any other way. Yep.
And I would fully hope that that would be the case.
Me too.
Dissenting opinions, we want to see all of that. Throw all the Legos out on the table, and then we'll build whatever we build together.
Yeah.
Any other comments from the board? Go ahead, Chairman.
Yeah, not yet.
It's gonna be a while.
Yeah. We, again, had a lengthy discussion about this with one of the county attorneys from Escambia County last time. We could probably do a couple things. We could do this and see if and see how it works, or we can see if we want to reevaluate on how that information would flow to staff and go with what we have.
Those would be my two recommendations.
Okay.
Jim or Matt, I got my hand up.
Go ahead, Commissioner Cole.
Thank you. Right now, I want us to be real cautious. We have an attorney's opinion that we should stay in sunshine. I've often thought and learned that we're better to lean towards the safe side of things rather than stick our neck out. I would like personally, and when it comes to a vote, I'm going to be voting to keep it in sunshine and go with the recommendation of the 3 members that would work in sunshine outside of the balance of whoever participates. Just let's try it for a while, see how it works, work some of the bugs out. Basically, if at a later date we see that we can resolve everything without violating sunshine and not having those 3 members there, I think would be safer than go about it the other way and have to put it in place later. That's all I got right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Other comments? Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with Commissioner Cole. We've gotten a legal opinion. We've discussed it at length, not only in this forum, but technical committee as well. So, yeah, I think because we have that legal opinion, we should stick with that.
Very good, thank you. Any other commentary?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Go ahead.
But I think that was also with the idea that they were going to be ranking them. And so if it truly is only a fact finding and that it gets turned over to staff to do that, I would be willing to see how that goes, especially through our transition. Maybe revisit it in a quarter and see. It's, again, based on where our discussion was last time and with Chairman Cole's comments, it was, we don't want to be appearing to skirt the rules, and definitely don't want to put any of their members in jeopardy regarding the sunshine. But I think if we can maybe do a little bit more research on the Tampa Bay program, maybe put some parameters about what they can and cannot do, and maybe do that, because again, I don't think it's necessarily something that we wanted to do for the group to hamper their efforts or the efforts of this board, but it was something that we realized that we would have to do as following the Sunshine Law as written. And I think that, go ahead.
Matt, can you hear me? Yes, sir. I apologize. I can hear Matt and Jim real well, but the members of the board, I can't really understand what they're saying. So before we vote or move it to a vote, could either Jim or Matt give me kind of a synopsis of where we're at, please?
So Matt, if you could, please pass on to him that basically we're looking at the options of either accepting the recommendation, declining the recommendation, or the third option that I believe Commissioner Bender has just sort of articulated, which is that we can go ahead and take no action on this recommendation, directing staff to take a closer look at how Tampa Bay is doing it and what the experiences there have been with regard to the Sunshine Law. Commissioner Bender, does that articulate clearly?
Yes,
what
sir,
you're
it does.
saying?
Thank
Okay. Matt, if you could please pass it on.
Commissioner Cole, did you hear that this time?
So, I think you practically have to eat the microphone to be able to be heard on the phone.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, please, sir.
In line with Commissioner Bender's recommendation, if we take a look at the actual work ahead of us and what these committees have to do in the next 2 to 3 to 4 months, we're not in a position of immediately receiving either a list of priorities or recommended courses of action. We are right now having a work plan reviewed and then regurgitated back as it gets revised to EPA, and then we will begin to implement that. In the meantime, we still have to hire staff to receive the information that is going to come from our committees. Probably the most advisory committee that we are dealing with is our technical committee. There is no list of people per se. It is almost an ad hoc gathering of brains that come in one room at any given time, who build an extreme list of whatever it is they're studying at that time. That comes back to staff that we don't have right now. So I think perhaps the course of action that has been discussed, which is let's come back and revisit this as we move along, is the more prudent decision. And we'll take a look at what the other estuary programs are doing. But our work ahead right now does not demand of us to take this action in immediate nature.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I think that you're very accurate with that. So if the motion that is made by this board is to table this for a future meeting, certainly I would be in support of that. If the motion is to decline this, I would be in support of that with the realization that we may have to come back and look at it again soon. If the motion were to be in support of this, I would have to vote against it at this time. Any other commentary? Yes, Councilwoman.
Well, the only thing I would add is I think it's a little hypocritical of us to name people to the Sunshine Board who aren't going to talk to each other and who wouldn't violate Sunshine anyway. I do think this is a really distorted way of trying to say we're in Sunshine without really changing anything, and I think the best thing to do is decline this and make it entirely fact-finding. I have every confidence that we can do that.
Any further commentary from the members of the board? Any commentary from those on the phone? I'll give you a second or two to hit to turn.
I would support Commissioner Bender's idea of tabling this, and let's get, we're not reinventing the wheel here. Let's see how other people are doing it, and we have time to do so. So I think we've beat this horse to death, and if anybody looks at it, recognizes that we have a realization that we're trying to keep this out in the open, not trying to hide nothing. So I don't see a problem with moving this till we can get a better grip on it.
Thank you, Commissioner. I disagree. I think there's just enough life left in this issue for a motion, a second, and a vote. If anybody inclined to make a motion.
I motion that we table this revision to the bylaws, directing staff to evaluate parameters to keep the committees as fact-finding in nature only.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? Thankfully, seeing none, please vote by show of hands. All those present are in favor. To the two speakers on the phone, could you please state your vote by voice?
Oh, my right hand's up.
The record reflect that Commissioner Cole voted in favor. Did we lose our
Commissioner Boyles, are you still on? Take that as a no.
Okay. Let the record reflect that Commissioner Boyles did not vote and is not present in the meeting. Mr. Director, any further discussion on your action item or on your update?
No, other than, I hate to bring attorneys back into the discussion, but it's my understanding from a recent email from one of the Escambia County attorneys that telephonic votes are not acceptable in this venue.
Not acceptable as a member of the counting vote, but I think it was important, given this situation and the fact
Absolutely.
that those two members are elected officials,
Just so
and the
I'm clear.
Sunshine Law affects them much more than it does anybody else. I wanted them to have the opportunity to be very much on the record.
Understood.
Thank you very much. Technical committee meeting update. Who will be providing that?
How did the vote go?
The vote was unanimous in favor of tabling this item until future time and directing the board to look into Tampa Bay and other similar organizations and see how they're handling it.
Thank you. Sounds good.
Pleasure, thank you. This brings us to the technical committee meeting update. Who will be providing that?
Mr. Chairman, just real quick, did we need to vote on accepting the John Hofstad as the alternate? Do we need to do anything with that?
Vote's not required.
Vote's not required, okay, thank you.
Your bylaws require a letter to be submitted to the chair, and that's been done.
It would be amusing if one county could veto the appointee of another county's person. That would make for some great press. We'd have everybody at the press table. So, thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner. Technical committee meeting update. Who will be providing it?
So your technical committee and your education committee met on September 18th. Really interesting discussions. One of the things that the technical committee is working on is developing a mission vision statement for this policy board. They will bring that to you once they've done some work on it to see what your thoughts are, because it's really something that this program doesn't have right now. Those types of things are useful in a lot of ways for sort of focusing people's actions and keep them on track on what they're supposed to be doing. So they're working on that. Chair Bibbs is actually coordinating a lot of that work, and at the next meeting, which is October 8th? Yes. They will be discussing that in further detail. I think it's important for all of your committees to have vision and mission statements. So they'll be developing them not only for this board, but also for themselves as well. The Education Committee, I got a great education. I mean, I actually enjoyed it because I had no idea. I mean, a lot of these committees go back decades when they were under Bark. The Education Committee, I just basically asked them because I didn't know. I said, well, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me what you've been doing. And they stepped back literally decades on the things that they did. And what that made me think of is that I would really like to see this policy board embrace your committees in a very specific way, in a very strong way. I think those committee chairs or co-chairs need to be at these policy board meetings every time you have one, and they need to address you because they need to be empowered as your committees, and you need to empower them by giving them that voice. So I think that as this program moves along, I would urge you to do that, to engage them as much as you can, because the Education Committee, I had no idea of all the success stories that they had. Whether it was K through 12 or just generic outreach to the public, they've done some amazing things. And one of the things, particularly in government, that we tend not to do, and we don't really have the option to do it, is to blow our own horn. They're doing a lot of good, and they're doing it under the radar. And I think the more that you can help them get a little bit above the radar, the better off you're going to be as far as the success of that committee, the success of the program. So that's just my sort of parting, 2 cents, that those committees are the heart of this program. They're the ones that are going to engage the community. They're the ones that are going to make this program successful. So I would just urge you to do as much as you can to fold them into this process as much as you can. And that goes for the yet-to-be composed Economic Committee. We've made some good start and some good contacts with people around the region who want to be on that Economic Committee. And that's going to be a huge way to get the word out for this program to people that normally would have no idea what an Estuary program was and no idea how that could positively impact their businesses. So again, those committees are incredibly important, and the more you can do to bring them in is the best thing you can do.
Thank you very much, Director. Does that cover items 6 and 7? Any commentary or questions from the board members for the director on items 6 or 7?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead,
Just because I was going to bring this up at the end, but it seems that, a lot of the individual counties and municipalities are moving forward with projects, living reefs and things like. Do we have a repository where our staffs could start submitting this so the technical committee could have a log of projects being done and the education committee can use that and go, hey, this is what's an example of what's being done in, Alabama or Escambia or Santa Rosa or Okaloosa on, a living reef, or we just got an application to comment on about more oyster beds in East Bay. So we could start building that to actually show people these are the type of things that this estuary program does, and it may give, each other ideas to share that information. I don't know if we have a repository. I know our staff is doing a ton of work with grants and pulling that together. Do you see that in the technical committee, the education committee? Because I'd hate to wait to do that if there's a place we could start dumping this data.
There's numerous areas out there. I mean, DEP has a portal and has information that you can go and look at all the different projects that are going on around the state, or around the region, actually. But it's important to remember that as much as we want to do a project for the estuary program right now, tomorrow, and have it in the ground and point to it and say, this is our project, and we can do that, we can try to work towards that. But the long-term process is the development of the CCMP that says, okay, let's not just do random acts of restoration. Let's do projects that are actually greater than the sum of the parts. And that's the tricky part. And that's what that CCMP will lead you to. And ultimately to a yearly work plan, so that those projects that you're doing actually have those attributes, that they're not separate projects, they're not separate restoration issues. I mean, that doesn't really answer your question, but yeah, you can go out, there's plenty of places to go out and look at all the work that's being done. The Restoration Summit in November is going to be a great source for that, because that's going to be, I think, was it all 23 counties, all 23 coastal counties will probably be represented there in one form or another in the projects that they're doing, whether it's from Restore Act, specifically Restore Act dollars from Pot 3 or from Pot 2 or any of the, other sources of Deepwater Horizon funding. So yeah, it's out there. I don't know that anybody's coordinated all of them into one place. There probably is. But I guarantee you your staff knows where those are. And I guarantee you at least half of the people on the technical committees know where those are.
Commissioner,
Thank
if I
you,
could
Commissioner.
chime in, that's a great suggestion. I just want to give a shout out to Santa Rosa County staff for providing us a comprehensive list of the coastal resilience projects y'all are doing in Santa Rosa County and all the great work coming out of that department. So congratulations to y'all.
Thank you, Mr. Posner. Councilwoman?
I was just wondering, how do we keep a record of the education and the technical committee? Is there a video that's taken and then made public or made accessible?
There are minutes kept. At times, there are individuals that do Facebook Live type videos, but it's not streamed the way this is. And mainly the reason this is because it's in this building with this staff. We don't have really the equipment to do that I'm aware of.
Well, if we had the meeting where the equipment is, we could do it. I go back and I look at those meetings. Sometimes I'm somewhere else and I can't attend. And I think there are a lot of people that maybe work during the day and can't attend these meetings. And if we're wanting to educate the public, I think having videos, I mean, that's the way of the world now, So I don't know what I would have to do to move that we keep a good video of these meetings. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Councilman Hill. That's certainly something that we've discussed. An issue with moving the meetings around will be having the facility capable of having audio-visual built in like we have in this facility. Perhaps once we get the support staff on board, maybe we can look at purchasing the necessary mobile equipment to do a Facebook Live on the Estuary Program's future Facebook page. But that's certainly something that we can have.
Well, if you ever need a motion, you've got one here.
Just a quick, there was a gentleman at the last technical committee meeting had all the equipment, was clearly recording. Anybody update us on that guy?
Sure. So that was Mr. Singley with ECW Live. They do come out to the meetings when they can, when their schedule allows. And I do have the link to that Facebook video that I'll distribute to the larger group.
Commissioner?
Thank you. Matt, I know that the first few meetings I went to, the technical and indoor education committee were immediately prior to this, and I don't know when we went away from it. I don't know if that worked better, or if they had I know we asked that we move our meetings up a little bit because we had been meeting at 3:30. I think we tried to meet at 2:30 or something like that, so I don't know if that hampered that. I think if we want them to be able to provide their input when we start discussing items, then of course making it easier for them to all attend and things like that would be something to look into. Again, we don't have nearly the number of people that we had before, and I don't know what's the cause of that.
Sure, I would concur with that. Especially we have agency staff that comes over from Tallahassee, Panama City, over from even as far as Montgomery, and it's a lot easier if they have back-to-back meetings versus an hour-and-a-half meeting. But that's something we can certainly look at, scheduling those in conjunction again.
Any further discussion on items 6 or 7 of the agenda? Seeing none, that brings us to item 8, agency updates.
If anyone's from any agency in the audience that wants to update, they're certainly welcome to come up.
Please go ahead and come to the podium. When you make your way to the podium, if you would begin by stating your name and the agency you represent.
Good morning. My name is Crystal Walsh. I'm with Florida Fish and Wildlife, Office of Conservation Planning, Division of Habitat and Species. And in regard to the planning consolidated tracking space that we just were talking about, there is a website that our Florida Wildlife Research Institute has developed, and it's called the Florida Conservation Planning Atlas, and a part of that is a conservations tracker where restoration projects from any agency can be deposited. There's quite a number of data, quite a number of projects already entered into that database. Those data include things like success criteria, location of the project, owner of the project, if it's a grant period. So there's a lot of information there already. So if there's something that you're about to implement, or you need more information about something that's proximal to your project, you can look on the map. It's an interactive map, so it's got a lot of information. So that's something I can pass along. But the reason for my update today is to talk just for a moment about a workshop that I've been involved in recently. The planning went on for about 1.5 years, and the forum was held recently at the Apalachicola National Estuary Research Institute down in Apalachicola. It was the purpose was to bring together landowners, forestry professionals, and drinking water utility folks to talk about the connection between forest lands and drinking water. So there were 55 folks that came to the conference. It was a 1.5 days. There were some field tours that went on and surrounding waterways and forest lands, Tate's Hell, and in the estuary, in the bays. So the primary goals were to build and strengthen professional relationships and networks with the forestry sector and the conservation sector. But what it ended up actually bringing together was some awareness about what utilities are doing for future planning. And it was identified that, while these groups had a lot of great ideas and projects were identified that even our estuary program might take on in the future, the planning sector was a big missing component. And while some of the planners, it was announced here at this group and the technical committee in the past, there were not many planners in the room. And so things like the role that forests play in protection of not just drinking water, but water quality in general, and where drinking water utilities talked about moving their wells inland and protection of that wellhead and having to look to large landowners for additional land because of the population growth along the coast and intrusion from salt water, and where were they going to do that, and how future land use needed to be addressed. Some of those key issues that came out of this workshop were surprising to me. We had objectives that were mentioned about wildlife and how management of timberlands could be thinned to the point that yield for water resources could actually enhance water resources. So there was, a lot of research provided, a lot of good discussion, but again, I think the planning component was a missing one. I'm going to be putting together a full presentation on this. We're still waiting for forestry's input on their outcomes that we got out of this workshop, and I'll be glad to present that at a later date. So thank you. I appreciate your time.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, please.
Crystal, was agriculture land use involved in that workshop, or strictly timberlands?
It was, most of the forest landowners who came owned large tracts of property that they managed for timber. And most often, that's the kind of property that the drinking water utilities are looking for protection around their wellheads, or around their wells. And they got into detail about, how much land was needed and how could conservation easements be offered to those landowners for those wells. So, the question was even raised by the landowner, well, if we're providing protection for water resources, then maybe there's some payment that, the landowner needs to, be offered. So there was some really good discussion, some things that, I don't think a lot of folks, would think about with future planning, and it was far-reaching. So it wasn't just, one county, it was the entire panhandle. So a lot of good information. Any other questions?
Seeing none from my peers, Ms. Walsh, sir, first of all, thank you very much for being here and
Thank
representing
you.
U.S. Fish and Wildlife. Going back to the first thing that you'd said, if you had you commented that there is already existing a repository of all those projects.
Sure.
Do other municipalities and agencies have the ability to put our projects into that?
Yes.
Okay, so then if that is, unless that is just an egregiously painful process, it would seem to me that the staff should look at that as our first course of action instead of reinventing something to meet what Commissioner Peach had meant. I mean, it sounds like it's already there. It's just a matter of getting hours into it. So I'd love to see what staff, if you could review that, see if that's something that's suitable to meet the suggestions that Commissioner Peach had, and if so, then bring it back to this. Actually, I don't think it would even have to come back to us, but to start making sure our projects are in there. There's a lot of great things from the NERDA, NIFWIF, and Restore projects that, quite frankly, ought to be in that repository if they're not already there.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Will do.
unless of course, there's contradicting direction from the full board. So, okay. Thank you again very much for your time.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other representatives, official representatives of any agencies here? Outstanding. As you make your way to the podium, if you could begin by stating your name and the agency you represent.
Amy Newbold, the EPA Gulf of Mexico program. I just wanted to make the policy board and the participants aware that the EPA Gulf of Mexico program just released a new funding opportunity under our Trash-Free Waters program. It's $5 million. These are going to be targeted at $500,000 grants. State and local governments are eligible. Nonprofits, universities, pretty much anybody but private entities can apply. These are focused on innovative approaches on removing or preventing trash from entering our waterways. The deadline's November 22nd. So I just want to make you aware of that, both in this capacity and in your formal capacity.
Excellent. Amy, just to be sure, that would be things like silt capture kind of concepts, anything that attenuates stormwater prior to going into our waterways? Would those be the kind of things that would meet that criteria?
So we do not typically focus on traditional infrastructure type projects. We're looking for innovative solutions. Now, if you can remove trash through some of the traditional ways, then I'm sure those would be eligible projects too. But we're also looking for projects that have an education piece to it, so that you're doing education and outreach to help on the prevention side of things as well.
Outstanding. Thank you, Amy. Any other comments from Ms. Newbold? Go ahead, Councilwoman.
Where is the information on this?
So you can find it on grants.gov. You can also find it on EPA's website, or if you will Google EPA Gulf of Mexico program, trash-free waters, it'll come up then too. But I've also provided the information to Matt, so he can get it to you as well, hopefully.
So
I will forward it to the board.
Yeah, recognizing that we all compete with each other for that same
Right.
pot of money, a great idea from the city of Pensacola should win out over a mediocre idea from the county. So if you would, please make sure that information gets to all members of this board, and including those that are not represented here today. Thanks.
I do have a couple updates, if that's all right at this time.
Do we have any other members representing any other agencies in the audience that wish to speak? Seeing none, then we'll go ahead and hand it over to you, Matt.
Thank you. Three things. The University of Florida IFAS Extension Research Center out of Milton is holding green infrastructure workshops in Santa Rosa and Escambia counties. They received a EPA Gulf of Mexico program grant earlier this year. They held their first workshop last night at the Tiger Point Community Center. The next workshop is October 3rd at the Saunders Beach Corrine Jones Resource Center, and the last one will be October 10th at the UF Pensacola State College Milton campus. All of those meetings are taking place at 6 o'clock, 6 to 7:15. And we really encourage the public to attend and learn about green infrastructure and what that means to the community and how they can get involved. This is just the first series of stakeholder meetings. Once the UF team gets that information compiled and they review and they have recommendations, they'll come back later in the process with future stakeholder meetings. The second update I have is from the Escambia and Santa Rosa County Extension offices. They are hosting, in conjunction with the Pensacola and Prudhoe Bay Estuary Program, the Great Scavenger Hunt, October 13th through 19th. That's a spin on a BioBlitz to look at, to really get the community engaged and get families out involved in the environment, to look at different species that we see in our daily interactions with the environment. And that information will help us inform the CCNP down the road. And that was sent out in an email yesterday afternoon. If you did not get that, I will be happy to forward that along again. Then my third and final update is for the benefit of the rest of the board and the stakeholders. Tomorrow, the Escambia County Commission will discuss a state appropriations request, and the Pensacola and Prudhoe Bay Estuary Program is one of those topics that will be discussed. Hopefully the board will approve that, and if that's the case, we will run that ask through the legislature this next session. That is a $500,000 appropriation request.
Excellent. Any commentary or questions for Matt on any of that? Seeing none, that concludes our agency updates. This brings us to the public comment, which is the final portion of our agenda items. Anybody who wishes to speak and address this board will be given 2 minutes to do so, as we are already over the hour that we had allotted to speak or for this meeting. I'll be keeping the timer here on my phone. When I call time, that will be the conclusion of your time. We will not be permitting any passing of time or grouping of time. So I don't have speaker forms here, so if you'll just make yourself known and make your way to the podium. Please begin by stating your name. Your time will begin as soon as you finish stating your name.
Margaret Hostetter, and I thank Ms. Walsh Crystal for pointing out the importance of trees, forestry, and so forth in our whole effort for water quality and so forth. As you know, I represent a group, Trees of Escambia County, Florida, and we're working diligently to try to bring to your attention, you in Santa Rosa County and Escambia County, how the development practices in your counties are detrimental to those, our concerns. And I hope you'll continue to give us an opportunity to work with the planners and bring to your attention the problems that we're discovering as just observers and citizens in the process. And regarding the trash removal and equipment that Amy mentioned, there's a grant for, there are wonderful new machinery that have been operating in different communities, I think Baltimore or someplace, and they are fixed equipment that skim the trash from the water, and they're placed in a where the river would come in to the bay. And so they're automated, and they are very well supported by their communities. And if we could qualify for a grant of $500,000, you'd be well on your way to attaining such a piece of equipment, which would show the community that our estuary program is doing something. And I think that's where the point of trying to get the word out to the community would be greatly enhanced if you have something demonstratable, active, that is actually in the water today doing something for the benefit of our waterways. So that would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hostetter. Do we have any other speakers that wish to be heard at this time? Excellent input, Ms. Hostetter, and I hope to see ideas just like that come before us or come from all of our communities and municipalities. It would be a shame for any of that money not to come to Escambia County or to the Pensacola-Perdido Bay Estuary Program. I forgot which hat I was wearing for the moment there. That concludes, if I understand correctly, that concludes all of those who wish to speak during public forum, and that closes public forum at this time. Before I gavel us to a close, is there anything else that any other member of the board or the staff has for the good of the whole? Seeing none, we stand adjourned.